I knew something was wrong when my bailiff stopped smiling. He had stood beside my bench for years. He had heard people lie, cry, scream, and beg. He had watched angry men point fingers across the courtroom and calm women fall apart over $500. But that morning, when Karen leaned toward him and whispered something into his ear, his face changed. Not fear, not shock, something colder. Concern. And in my courtroom, when the bailiff gets concerned before I do, I pay attention. Karen stepped back like nothing had happened. She smoothed the sleeve of her cream-colored blazer, lifted her chin, and gave me the kind of smile people use when they think they are already winning. Across from her sat an old man named Arthur Bell, 79 years old, retired bus mechanic, hands cracked from a lifetime of work. Shoes polished so carefully they looked younger than he did. On the table in front of him was a small wooden box. Not expensive, not fancy, just old, the kind of box a person keeps because throwing it away would feel like betraying someone. Arthur kept one hand on top of it. Karen kept her eyes away from it. That was the first thing I noticed. The case was supposed to be simple. Arthur claimed Karen, his late wife's former caregiver, had taken a pearl brooch from his home. Karen claimed Arthur was confused, lonely, and looking for someone to blame. I have heard that sentence many times. It usually comes from people who benefit when an old person is not believed. Mr. Bell, I said, tell me what happened. Arthur opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His fingers tightened on the wooden box. Karen sighed softly, just enough for him to hear, not enough for everyone to call it rude. That told me more about her than her first answer did. Before we go further, keep watching this carefully, because what Karen whispered to my bailiff had nothing to do with the brooch. And if you think you already know what kind of woman Karen is, wait until you see what was hidden inside that little wooden box. Subscribe if you follow courtroom stories like this, and tell me in the comments what you think Karen whispered. Arthur finally spoke. My wife wore that brooch every Sunday. His voice was low, not weak, careful, like every word cost him something. She passed 6 months ago. Before she died, she told me to give it to our granddaughter, Mia, when she turned 16. Karen looked down at her nails. Maya, that name meant something to her. I saw it in the tiny paws of her hand. How old is Mia now? I asked. Arthur swallowed. 15. The courtroom became quieter. A missing brooch was one thing. A dead grandmother's gift for a teenage girl was another, Karen's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client strongly denies taking anything. Mr. Bell has no proof. Karen nodded no proof. Karen nodded before he finished, too quickly. People who are innocent usually wait for the full sentence. People who are performing jump to the applause. Ems Karen, I said, were you ever alone in Mr. Bell's home? I was a caregiver, she said. Of course I was. Were you ever alone in the bedroom where the brooch was kept? Her smile did not move. Her eyes did. Many times. His wife needed care. Arthur lowered his head. Karen's words were polite. But the way she said needed care made it sound like Arthur's wife had been a burden. I leaned forward. Mr. Bell, where was the brooch kept? He tapped the wooden box. In here. Karen looked at the box again, only for a second. But this time, she looked afraid of it. Not guilty. Afraid that was different. Arthur opened the box. Inside was a folded lace handkerchief, a yellowed photograph, and a small birthday card with a purple heart drawn on the front. No brooch. Karen smiled. There you go, she said softly. I turned toward her. Did I ask you a question? Her smile froze. No, Your Honor. Arthur lifted the photograph. A woman sat on a porch swing, laughing. A young girl leaned against her shoulder. On the woman's coat was a small pearl brooch shaped like a bird. Arthur touched the picture with one finger. My wife said birds always knew how to come home. Nobody spoke. Even Karen's attorney looked uncomfortable. Then Arthur removed the birthday card. His hands began to shake. This was from Mia. She made it when she was 9. Karen shifted in her chair. I watched her. People reveal themselves when they think attention is somewhere else. Arthur opened the card. Inside, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "Grandma, when I grow up, I want your bird pin because it looks like it can fly." Arthur looked at me. "My wife kept this card in the box with the brooch, and now the brooch is gone," I said. He nodded. Karen's attorney spread his hands. Said yes. Proof? No. He was right legally. But court is not only about what people bring in their hands. Sometimes it is about what they cannot hide on their faces. That was when Karen leaned toward the bailiff. At first, I thought she was asking where the restroom was. Then I saw the bailiff's jaw tightened. She whispered only a few words. The room did not hear them. But I saw Arthur look up, not because he heard, because he felt the room change. The bailiff stepped closer to my bench. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "you need to know what she just said." Karen straightened. Her attorney turned toward her. "What did you say?" Karen ignored him. She stared at Arthur, and for the first time all morning her smile was gone. I looked at the bailiff. "What did Miss Karen whisper?" He hesitated. That hesitation made the courtroom colder. Then he said, "She told me to remove the girl in the back row." Arthur turned slowly. So did everyone else. In the last row sat a teenage girl in a blue sweater, holding a purple birthday card against her chest, Maya Arthur's granddaughter. Her eyes were fixed on Karen, and she was crying without making a sound. I looked back at Karen. "Why," I asked, "would you want that child removed?" Karen's face went pale, just enough. And that was when Mia stood up and whispered, "Because she knows I saw her." Mia's voice was so small that most people in the gallery barely heard it. But Karen heard it. And that was what mattered, because the second Mia said, "I saw her," Karen stopped breathing the way innocent people breathe. She didn't look confused. She didn't look offended. She looked interrupted. There is a difference. Arthur pushed himself halfway out of his chair. "Mia." "Sweetheart, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Mia said. She walked toward the front slowly, holding the purple birthday card against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Karen's attorney stood. "Your Honor, this child was not listed as a witness." I looked at him. "Your client just tried to have her removed." He sat down. Karen leaned toward him, whispering fast, but he did not lean back this time. That told me something, too. Even her own attorney was beginning to understand she had walked into a room full of small things she could not control. "Mia," I said gently, "what did you see?" She looked at her grandfather first, then at Karen. "I went to Grandpa's house the night Grandma got taken to the hospital," she said. "Mom told me to pick up her sweater because Grandpa was too upset." Arthur closed his eyes. He remembered that night. Karen remembered it too. I saw it in the way her hand tightened around the strap of her purse, Maya continued. "When I came upstairs, Karen was in Grandma's room." Karen spoke quickly. "Because I was packing medication." Mia shook her head. "You were holding the bird pin." The room went silent. Not dramatic silence, real silence. The kind where people stop moving because they do not want to miss the next breath. Karen smiled, but it was weak now, a copy of her earlier smile. "That's not true," she said, Maya's eyes filled with tears. But her voice stayed steady. "You saw me at the door. Then you closed your hand." Arthur gripped the edge of the table. I turned to Karen. "Did you know Mia saw you?" "No." Too fast, Agin. I looked at Mia. "Did Karen say anything to you?" Mia nodded. She said Grandma gave it to her. Arthur's face changed. Not anger. Pain, the kind of pain that arrives when someone uses the voice of the dead to protect a lie. Karen sat back. She misunderstood. Mia looked down at the birthday card. "No," she whispered. "I didn't. I watched Karen's purse again. She kept touching it, not opening it, not moving it, just touching it. People protect what matters. Sometimes it is a person, sometimes it is a lie, and sometimes it is both. Karen, I said, place your purse on the table. Her attorney turned toward her. Do it. Karen didn't move. That was the loudest answer she had given all morning. Your Honor, she said, this is insulting. No, I said. It is simple. The bailiff stepped closer, only one step. Karen placed the purse on the table, slowly, too slowly. Arthur stared at it. Maya stepped behind him. I nodded to the bailiff. Open it! Karen's attorney stood again. Your Honor, counsel, I said. Your client whispered to my bailiff to remove a child witness. She then denied knowing why that child mattered. Now, the child says she saw your client holding the missing brooch. Sit down. He sat. The bailiff opened the purse. Inside were keys, a phone, a wallet, lipstick, a folded receipt, and a small velvet pouch. Arthur covered his mouth. Karen said, that is mine. Nobody had asked. That is another thing guilty people do. They answer questions before they are born. The bailiff placed the pouch on my bench. I opened it. Inside was a pearl brooch shaped like a bird. The courtroom reacted. But I kept my eyes on Karen because the brooch was not the reveal. Her face was. She did not look caught. She looked angry that the room had finally become smart enough to see her. Arthur began to cry quietly. Mia held his shoulder. Karen's attorney put his hand over his eyes. Karen, I said, you told this court you never saw the brooch. Karen looked at Arthur, then at Mia, then at me. She gave it to me. She said. Arthur's head lifted. No, he whispered. Karen's voice grew stronger. His wife gave it to me. She said I was the only one who took care of her properly. Mia shook her head. Grandma would never. You were a child. Karen snapped. There it was. The mask finally cracked wide enough for everyone to see what had been standing behind it. Control, not care. Power, not kindness. I looked at the purple birthday card in Mia's hands. Mia, I said, may I see that card? She hesitated, then gave it to the bailiff. He handed it to me. I opened it again. The childish message was still there. But this time I noticed something on the back. A small line of handwriting, not Mia's, an older hand. Arthur saw me turn the card over. His face went blank. Your Honor? He whispered. I read the words silently first, then once more, because sometimes a courtroom becomes quiet before the truth enters. And this truth needed a quiet room. On the back of the card, Arthur's wife had written 7 words that changed the entire case. I looked at Karen. She was staring at the card now, not the brooch, the card. And for the first time since she entered my courtroom, she looked truly afraid because the dead woman had left a message, and Karen had just sworn under oath to the one lie that message could destroy. The words on the back of the birthday card were not dramatic. That made them worse. They were written in thin blue ink, slightly crooked, like Arthur's wife had pressed the pen down with the last strength she had left. Give Mia the bird. Karen knows where, 7 words. And Karen had just told me Arthur's wife gave the brooch to her. I looked up slowly. Karen looked away. That was the first honest thing she had done all morning. Arthur reached for the table, but his hand missed the edge. Maya grabbed his arm. Grandpa? He did not answer. His eyes were locked on the card. My Ruth wrote that, he whispered. I nodded. For a moment he looked smaller than before, not weaker. Just hit by the kind of truth that arrives too late to ask the person you love why they never told you. Karen's attorney leaned toward her. Do not speak. But Karen's had never been good at silence. That proves nothing, she said. I almost admired the confidence, almost. Actually, I said, it proves you lied about one thing. I did not lie. You said Ruth gave you the brooch. She did. Then why would she write that you knew where it was? Karen blinked once, twice. Then she smiled, a different smile now, sharper, because she was confused. Arthur lifted his head. My wife was sick, he said. not confused. Karen turned to him. You weren't there every hour. Mia stepped forward. I was there that night. Karen's eyes cut toward her, fast, cold. That look told me something important. Karen was not afraid of Arthur. She was afraid of Mia. I looked at the brooch on my bench, a small pearl bird, wings open, beautiful, but not expensive enough to explain this much panic. That meant the brooch itself was not the whole secret. Mr. Bell, I asked, did this brooch open? Arthur frowned. No, it's just a pin, Mia whispered. Grandma said it could. The room turned toward her. Karen's hand moved, just an inch, toward the purse. The bailiff noticed and stepped closer. Maya looked embarrassed, like she had said something foolish. She told me birds carry messages, Mia said. I thought she was just being Grandma. Arthur stared at the brooch. His breath changed. Ruth used to say that, he whispered, when we were young. She'd hide notes in my lunch and draw little birds on them. The courtroom softened around him, even I felt it, not because of the brooch, because suddenly that little pearl bird was not jewelry anymore. It was a language between two people who had loved each other longer than Karen had been alive. I picked up the brooch carefully. The back looked ordinary, a pin, a clasp, nothing more. Karen exhaled. Too soon. Then Mia said, the wing. I looked at her. What about the wing? She pointed without coming closer. Grandma always pressed the left wing. Karen's face changed so quickly that I nearly missed it. The bailiff did not. He moved between Karen and the bench. I pressed the left wing. Nothing happened. Karen breathed again. Then Arthur whispered, not the left wing from the front. I turned the brooch over. Press the other side. There was a tiny click. The bird's body opened. Maya covered her mouth. Arthur stopped breathing. Inside the brooch was not a diamond, not money, not anything Karen could sell for much. It was a folded piece of paper, no larger than a postage stamp. I removed it with the tip of my pen. The paper was old, worn, high there long before Ruth became ill. I unfolded it. There were only 2 lines, a name, and a number. Karen stood. Your Honor, that is private. Her attorney whispered, sit down. She didn't. That told me the paper mattered more than the brooch. I looked at her. Private to whom? Karen swallowed. No answer. Arthur leaned forward, squinting. What does it say? I read the name silently. Then I looked at Mia, then at Karen, because the name on the paper was not Ruth's. It was not Arthur's. It was not Mia's. It was Karen Mills. And under it was a bank deposit box number. The gallery began to murmur. I raised my hand. Silence returned. Arthur looked lost. Why would my wife have Karen's name hidden inside her brooch? Karen spoke before anyone else could because she trusted me. Mia shook her head. No, Karen turned on her. Stop saying that. The words cracked through the room, not loud, but ugly. Maya stepped back. Arthur stood in front of her without thinking. That was his brave moment, old knees, shaking hands. But he still moved between Karen and the child. I have seen stronger men do less. I looked at Karen. Why is there a deposit box number inside Ruth Bell's brooch? I don't know. This time, she answered slowly, too slowly. Now she was searching for a lie that fit the room. I turned to the bailiff. Call the bank listed on that paper. Karen's attorney stood. Your Honor, this is far outside. Your client brought the brooch into this courtroom after denying she had it, I said. We are already outside. He sat. The bailiff made the call from the side wall. Karen's eyes followed him. Every second, Arthur held Mia's hand. Maya still held the purple card. The bird brooch sat open on my bench like a tiny witness nobody had expected. Then the bailiff looked back at me. His face had changed again. Same concern as before, only deeper. He covered the phone and said, Judge, the bank confirms the box exists. Karen closed her eyes. Just for a second, I asked, in whose name? The bailiff looked at Karen, then at Arthur, then at me. Not Karen's, he said. The room froze. I leaned forward. Then whose? The bailiff lowered the phone. Mia Bell. Arthur turned to his granddaughter. Maya looked as confused as he was, but Karen was not confused. Karen looked furious, and that was when I understood the brooch had never been the prize. It was the key to something Ruth had hidden from Mia, something Karen had been trying to reach before Mia turned 16. I looked at Karen's purse again. Bailiff, I said, checked the folded receipt. He removed the small receipt from her purse and handed it to me. Karen whispered, no. This time, everyone heard it. The receipt was from the same bank, dated 3 days earlier. And printed across the bottom were 4 words that made Arthur sit down hard in his chair. Access request denied. Minor account. Maya's lips parted. Karen's mask was gone now. All that remained was anger. I looked at her and asked the question she had been fighting since she entered my courtroom. Mims Mills, what is inside that deposit box? Karen said nothing. But from the back row, an elderly woman slowly stood up. She had been silent the entire time. White hair, black coat, both hands wrapped around a cane, and when Karen saw her, the color drained from her face. The woman looked at me and said, Your Honor, I know what Ruth hid in that box. Karen stepped back, and the bailiff moved toward her before she could run. The elderly woman did not look like someone who came to court for drama. She looked like someone who had carried a secret too long. Her cane tapped once against the floor. Karen took 1 step back. Not away from me, away from her. That's from her. That told me the woman was not a stranger. State, I said. Woman lifted her chin. Evelyn Porter. Arthur turned slowly. Evie, his voice broke on the name. Mia looked between them. Grandpa, who is she? Arthur did not answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the woman in the black coat. My wife's sister, he whispered. Karen's attorney rubbed his forehead. He knew now. This was no longer a missing brooch case. It had become a room full of people Karen thought would never meet. Evelyn walked forward with careful steps. Every tap of her cane made Karen's face tighter. Ruth called me 2 weeks before she died, Evelyn said. She was frightened. Arthur's hand went to his chest. She never told me. Evelyn looked at him with pain in her eyes. She didn't want to worry you. That sentence hurt him more than the first. People often think love means sharing everything. Sometimes love means hiding fear because the other person is already drowning. I looked at Evelyn. What was Ruth afraid of? Evelyn pointed at Karen. Karen laughed. It was a terrible laugh. Too thin. Too late. I cared for Ruth, she said. Evelyn turned toward her. You corrected Ruth when she called for her husband. The courtroom went still. Arthur looked up. What? Evelyn's voice trembled, but it did not weaken. You told her Arthur was tired of her. You told her Mia only visited because she felt guilty. You told her everyone would move on once she was gone. Mia covered her mouth. Arthur closed his eyes. Karen snapped, that is a lie. Evelyn looked at me. Ruth recorded it. Karen stopped moving. Not her hands, not her eyes. Everything. There are moments when guilt enters a courtroom before proof does. That was one of them. I looked at Karen. Did Ruth record you? No. This time the answer was not fast. It was empty. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket. Karen's attorney stood. Your Honor, I need to object before. No, Karen said. Everyone looked at her, even her attorney. She had not meant to say it out loud, but fear pulled the word from her before strategy could stop it. Evelyn removed a small silver key, not the brooch key, a bank key. Arthur stared at it. Ruth gave that to you? Evelyn nodded. She said if anything happened to the bird pin, I was to come forward. Karen leaned on the table. The woman who had entered my courtroom with perfect posture now looked like she needed furniture to remain standing. Maya whispered, "What's in the box?" Evelyn's eyes softened. "Not money, sweetheart." Karen's face twitched. That answer bothered her because it meant even she had not known everything. I have learned that greedy people hate two things: losing and discovering they chased the wrong prize. Evelyn continued, Ruth hid three things: a small photo album and a cassette tape. Arthur looked confused. Cassette? Evelyn nodded sadly. Ruth said Karen didn't know old things still worked. For the first time, I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because Ruth Bell, sick and weak and running out of time, had understood something Karen did not. Modern liars often forget old memories have old hiding places. Karen whispered to her attorney, Stop this. He did not move. I looked at Evelyn. Why would Karen want access to Mia's box? Evelyn turned toward Mia, then Arthur, then me, because Ruth changed her will. Arthur shook his head. Ruth didn't have anything. Evelyn's eyes filled. She had your house. The room shifted again. Arthur looked stunned. Our house? Evelyn nodded. It was in her name from her mother's side. She left it to Mia, with Arthur allowed to live there for the rest of his life. Maya's face went pale. Karen's attorney looked at his client. Now he understood the shape of the lie. The brooch opened to the deposit box. The deposit box held proof. The proof protected the house. And Karen had been trying to remove Mia from the room because the child was not just a witness. She was the person Karen had been trying to rob. Karen lifted both hands. This is insane. I never wanted that house. I looked at the receipt from the bank. Then why did you try to access Mia's box 3 days ago? Karen looked at the paper, then at Arthur, then at Mia. Her eyes settled on the child, cold again. Mia is 15, she said. She doesn't understand adult matters. Mia stepped closer to Arthur. This time, Arthur did not hide her behind him. He held her hand and let her stand beside him. That mattered. Protecting a child is not always shielding them from truth. Sometimes it is standing with them while truth enters. Evelyn placed the bank key on the table. The cassette proves Ruth knew. Knew what? I asked. Evelyn looked at Karen. That Karen had been asking Ruth to sign papers. Arthur's voice cracked. What papers? Karen closed her eyes. Evelyn answered softly, papers making Karen the manager of Ruth's estate. Arthur sat down hard, Maya whispered. Grandma wouldn't do that. No, Evelyn said. She didn't. Karen suddenly stood. I am done being attacked. The bailiff moved closer. I said nothing. Silence is useful when people are near the edge. Karen looked at me. This old woman hates me. That man is confused. The girl is emotional. And now everyone wants to believe I'm some monster because I wore nice clothes to court. There it was. The last shelter of a cornered liar. Make the room guilty for noticing. I leaned forward. Miss Karen? Sit down. She didn't now. She sat, but her hands were shaking. Not with sadness, with rage. Evelyn looked tired now, like speaking had taken years from her, but she was not finished. Ruth told me Karen said something the night before the hospital. Mia stiffened. Arthur looked at his granddaughter. What did she say? Evelyn's mouth trembled. She said, once Mia turns 16, that little box becomes a problem. The words landed like a door locking. Maya's birthday was coming. The box was in Mia's name. Karen needed the brooch before then. Now the timing made sense. I looked at the purple birthday card, at the bird brooch, at the bank receipt, at Karen's purse. All those small things had been waiting for the same moment. But something still bothered me. Karen had risked too much for a house she did not legally own. Smart villains do not gamble unless they believe the table is already tilted. So I asked the question no one else had asked. Karen, who told you about the deposit box? Karen froze. Arthur looked at me. Evelyn looked confused. Maya's eyes widened. Karen's attorney slowly turned his head toward his client because he understood. I had not asked if Karen Terra knew. I had asked who helped her know. Karen's lips parted. No sound came out. Then my bailiff returned from the side door. He was holding a phone. Judge, he said, The bank manager is on the line. Karen whispered, "Don't," but it was too late. The bailiff looked at me. His voice was low. "The bank says someone came with Karen 3 days ago." Arthur stood. Mia grabbed his sleeve. I looked at Karen. "Who?" The bailiff glanced at the phone, then at the back of the courtroom, and before he could answer, the courtroom doors opened. A man in a gray suit stepped inside. Arthur's face went white. Maya whispered, "Dad?" Karen smiled again. Not fully, just enough to tell me the story had one more villain than we thought. The man in the gray suit stopped just inside the courtroom. He had the face of someone who had practiced being calm in the mirror. Clean shave, expensive watch, perfect tie, but his eyes gave him away. They went first to Karen, then to the bird brooch, then to Mia. Not his daughter first. The brooch. That told me almost everything. Maya's voice shook. "Dad?" Arthur stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. "Daniel," he said, "what are you doing here?" Daniel Harper looked at me like he had accidentally walked into the wrong room. "I'm here for my daughter." Karen's smile grew just a little, not warm, relieved, the kind of relief a person feels when backup finally arrives. I looked at Mia. She had not moved toward him. Children usually run toward safety. Mia stayed beside Arthur. That mattered. "Mr. Harper," I said, "were you at the bank with Miss Karen 3 days ago?" Daniel adjusted his cuff. A small gesture, too smooth. "I was trying to understand what Ruth had left for my child." "Your child," I repeated. Maya looked down. Arthur's face hardened. Daniel stepped closer. "I'm her father. I have rights." Evelyn Porter tapped her cane once. "Funny," she said. "Ruth said you remembered those rights only when money was nearby." Daniel looked at her with polite disgust. Karen whispered, "Don't answer her." But I heard it. So did Daniel, so did everyone. I leaned forward. Miss Karen, how exactly do you know Mr. Harper?" Karen's attorney closed his eyes. He already knew the answer would hurt. Karen said, "Through Ruth." Daniel said, at the same time, "Through Mia." 2 different lies. Same room. The silence after that was beautiful. Not peaceful. Maya finally looked at her father. "You know her?" Daniel softened his voice. "Sweetheart, adults have to handle things you don't understand." There it was again. The same sentence Karen had used, different mouth, same poison. Maya's face changed. Not because she was shocked, because she recognized it. I have learned something about manipulation. It often travels in repeated phrases. People who conspire sometimes forget they start sounding alike. I turned to the bailiff. "Put the bank manager on speaker." Karen stood. "Your Honor, please." "Sit." She sat. The bailiff placed the phone near my bench. The bank manager's voice came through. Nervous but clear. "Yes, Judge. 3 days ago, Miss Karen Mills came in with Mr. Daniel Harper. They asked to access a deposit box registered for Mia Bell." Daniel interrupted, as her father. The bank manager continued. "They presented a paper stating Mr. Harper had authority over Mia's property." Arthur turned toward Daniel. "What paper?" Daniel said nothing. The bank manager added, "The request was denied because the box required Mia's presence after her 16th birthday, or a court order." Mia whispered, "My birthday is next month." Karen looked at the floor. Daniel looked at me. And Arthur looked like an old man watching his family tree split in half. I asked the bank manager, "Did they say why they needed the box?" A pause. Then Ms. Mills said the contents were dangerous for the child. Evelyn's hand tightened on her cane. Maya stepped back as if the words had touched her. Dangerous. That was the same idea Karen had whispered to my bailiff. Remove the girl. Keep her away. Call the truth dangerous. I ended the call. No one moved. Then Evelyn slowly reached into her coat again. This time, she pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a cassette tape, old black, labeled in Ruth's handwriting. For Mia, when the bird comes home. Arthur covered his mouth. Karen went pale. Daniel whispered, "That can't be real." A strange thing to say. Not, "What is that?" Not, "I don't know anything about that." That can't be real. The courtroom heard it. Maya heard it too. I looked at Daniel. "Why would you think it might not be real?" He swallowed, no answer. The bailiff found a small tape player from the evidence cabinet. Old courts collect old things. Sometimes old things wait years for the right truth. He placed the cassette inside. The room seemed to shrink. Click. A soft hiss filled the courtroom. Then Ruth Bell's voice came through, thin, tired, alive. "Arthur, if you are hearing this, I am sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Arthur bent forward, like the voice had touched his chest. Maya started crying silently. Ruth continued, "Karen has been asking me to sign papers." Daniel brought them. They said it would make things easier for Mia, but I read enough to know easier for them meant empty for her. Daniel took one step back. Karen shook her head. "No." Ruth's voice kept playing. I hid the brooch because Karen kept looking for it. She knew it opened the bank box, but she did not know Evie had the key. If they try to say I was confused, remember this. I knew exactly who loved me when I was dying. Arthur broke then, not loudly. He placed one hand over his eyes and folded into himself. Maya held his arm. Ruth's voice grew softer. "Maya, my sweet girl, if you hear this one day, the house is yours because your grandfather built love into every room. Do not let anyone sell your memories and call it help." Daniel's face collapsed, not from guilt, from exposure. Karen's was worse. She looked angry at a dead woman for still being able to speak. The tape clicked, but it wasn't finished. There was another voice. Karen's for faint, but clear. Once Arthur is declared confused, Daniel can sign. Mia won't fight what she doesn't understand. Mia stared at her father. Daniel whispered, "Mia." She stepped away from him, just one step, but it felt like a door closing. Then Daniel's own voice came from the tape. "She turns 16 next month. We need the box before then." Arthur stood. The bailiff moved between him and Daniel. But Arthur did not lunge. He did not shout. He simply looked at the man his granddaughter called father. "You tried to take her home?" Daniel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Karen suddenly stood. "He came to me." Daniel turned on her. "You said Ruth would sign." Karen laughed once. "You wanted the sale more than I did." There it was, the partnership breaking liars often survive by standing together. "Truth only needs one crack." Daniel pointed at Karen. "She told me the brooch had the number." Karen snapped. "And you told me Mia would never know." Mia's birthday card slipped from her hands and landed on the floor. The purple heart faced upward. Nobody picked it up. Not yet. I wanted everyone to see it. A child's card, a grandmother's promise. A father's betrayal standing beside it. That was the image I knew viewers would remember. I looked at Karen, then Daniel. "You both came into this courtroom thinking the weakest person here was the child." Neither answered. I looked at Mia. She was crying now, but she was standing. That mattered. Arthur bent slowly, picked up the purple card, and placed it back in her hands. Maya held it to her chest. Karen whispered, "This is not over." And that was when Evelyn Porter lifted her cane and pointed toward the courtroom door. "Yes," she said, "it is." The doors opened again. 2 officers stepped inside. Karen looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Karen. And for the first time all morning, neither one of them had anyone left to blame. But before I could speak my ruling, Mia looked down at the bird brooch on my bench. Then she said 6 words that stopped the entire courtroom. Grandma said there were 2 birds. For a moment, nobody understood Mia. Not Arthur, not Evelyn, not even Karen. But Karen reacted first. Her eyes moved, not to the brooch, not to the officers, to the wooden box on Arthur's table. That was enough. I looked at the box again. Old wood, soft corners. A faded scratch near the lid. I had seen it all morning, but I had not really seen it. The scratch was not a scratch. It was a tiny bird carved into the wood. Arthur noticed where I was looking. His hand moved to the box, slowly. "Mia," he whispered, "what did Grandma tell you?" Mia wiped her face with her sleeve. "She said if the first bird came home, Grandpa would know where the second one slept." Arthur stared at the carved bird. Then his face changed, not with confusion, with memory. "Ruth used to hide my lunch money under the lining," he said softly. "When we were first married." Said mechanics lost everything except their hunger. A quiet laugh moved through the courtroom, small, broken, human. Karen did not laugh. Daniel did not move. Arthur opened the wooden box again. The brooch was gone from it, but the lace handkerchief and old photograph remained. His hands trembled as he lifted the lining. Nothing. Karen exhaled. Too soon, Maya stepped closer. "No, Grandpa. The bird sleeps under the wing." Arthur looked at the lid. Inside, the wooden lid was a thin panel, so thin most people would never notice it. He pressed near the carved bird. A click sounded. Karen whispered, "Stop." The officers looked at her. Daniel's face turned gray. The panel opened. Inside was a folded letter and one small silver charm, a second bird, not pearl, not expensive, just silver. Worn smooth from years of being touched. Arthur picked it up and broke down before he even opened the letter. "That was mine," he whispered. Evelyn covered her mouth. Maya looked at him. "Yours?" Arthur nodded. "I gave it to Ruth when I had nothing else. Before the house, before Mia's mother, before all of it." He held the small bird in his palm. Suddenly, the whole case became smaller and bigger at the same time. This was not about property anymore, not even about the brooch. It was about two people who had spent a lifetime hiding little pieces of love where greedy people never thought to look. I unfolded the letter. Ruth's handwriting was weak, but clear. "Arthur, if they found the first bird, they already hurt Mia. Give this to the judge. Do not blame yourself. I saw what they were doing. I stayed quiet only long enough to protect the child." Karen shook her head. "No." I continued reading. "Daniel has been asking about the house." Karen told him I was easy to frighten. They wanted me to sign papers. I did not. I left everything where Mia could not lose it before she was old enough to understand who truly loved her. Maya began to cry again. This time Arthur pulled her close. Ruth's letter ended with one final line. "And if Karen smiles in court, Arthur, remember this." She smiled when she thought I was too weak to hear her. The room went completely still. Karen's smile was gone now. Not hidden, gone. I looked at her for a long moment, then at Daniel Ems Mills. I said, "Mr. Harper, this court has heard enough." Daniel stepped forward. "Your Honor, I made a mistake, but I am Mia's father." Mia's fingers tightened around Arthur's sleeve. I looked at Daniel. Being a father is not a title you pull out when there is property attached. He lowered his eyes. Karen tried one last time. "Your Honor." That letter is emotional. It's not legal proof. I looked at the brooch, the bank receipt, the cassette tape, the birthday card, the hidden letter, then back at her. Ems Mills, you are correct about one thing. This case did not begin with legal proof. Karen lifted her chin slightly. I continued. It began with a child being told she was too young to understand, an old man being called confused, a dying woman being underestimated, and a caregiver thinking kindness made her invisible. No one spoke. Judgment for Mr. Bell. The brooch is to be returned immediately to Mia Bell. Copies of the taped bank receipt, letter, and all related materials will be forwarded for further investigation. The officer stepped toward Karen and Daniel. Karen looked at the bailiff, the same man she had whispered to at the beginning. This time she had nothing to whisper. Daniel turned to Mia. "Mia, please." She looked at him with tears on her face. Then she said, "Grandma was right. I understand enough." 6 words, clean stronger than any speech in that courtroom. Daniel looked away. Karen was escorted out first. Her shoes clicked against the floor, but the sound no longer felt powerful. It felt empty. Daniel followed. He did not fight. People like him rarely fight once the room stops believing them. When the doors closed, Arthur placed the pearl brooch in Mia's hand. Then he placed the small silver bird beside it. "The first one was your grandmother's," he said. "The second one was mine." Mia looked at both birds resting in her palm. "What do I do with them?" Arthur smiled through tears. "You keep them together." Evelyn sat down slowly, her cane across her knees. For the first time all morning, her face looked lighter, not happy, but free. I watched Mia open the purple birthday card and slide both birds carefully inside, not because they belonged to the card, because that card was where her grandmother's promise had first learned how to fly. Before leaving, Arthur turned back to me. He tried to speak, couldn't, so he simply nodded. I nodded back. Judges are trained to write orders, not heal wounds. But sometimes a courtroom gives people one thing grief never can. An answer. Arthur walked out holding Mia's hand. Evelyn followed beside them. The wooden box was under Arthur's arm. The purple card was pressed against Mia's chest, and inside it rested two little birds that had survived greed, lies, and death itself. I sat there after they left, staring at the empty defendant's chair. After all my years on the bench, I have learned this. Cruel people often believe love is weak because it speaks softly, but love notices, love remembers. Love hides truth in birthday cards, old boxes, tiny birds, and the hands of children brave enough to speak, and when truth finally comes home, does not need to shout.